Well, happy whatever day this is that you're watching. This is Richard Rosen from Winnipeg, and this is our first episode on Facebook page for Green Burial Manitoba. Green Burial Manitoba is here to bring education and awareness for bringing and creating environmentally sustainable end-of-life practices. This will be a place to share ideas, events, and resources, and that we hope that you can make use of this page, share it with others to help make the best choices that you possibly can. Green Burial Manitoba is associated with and through the Green Burial Society of Canada. And for those of you who don't know what Green Burial is, I'll tell you what it isn't. It's not a new idea. It's very, very old. It's been around longer than the funeral industry was. It is not necessarily a low-cost driven choice for disposition of your person. It's not a fringe fad that is just set for environmentalists. It's not, certainly isn't a poor use of land. And cremation isn't the greener way to be doing an environmentally friendly funeral. And it's also not akin to doing nothing for the honor of our deceased. But it really is historically the way we've done things for millennia. It means that we don't embalm the body. It's an option for many end-of-life families and rituals. It's a steadily growing trend across the planet, including 10 cemeteries across Canada from BC to Nova Scotia. It's environmentally sensitive, and it's part of a set and deliberate way of doing funerals, and founded on the 5 core principles of what green burial is. So with that little prelude of what Green Burial Manitoba is all about and what we're going to try to accomplish through these interviews, we welcome for our very first interview today, Tracy Chalmers. Tracy is the owner of Endwell, and Endwell is an end-of-life doula service that supports individuals and families through end-of-life care and services, both in North and West Vancouver, British Columbia. Tracy, welcome to Winnipeg and our very first episode for Green Burial Manitoba.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Richard. And it is such an honor to be here, especially talking about something as important as how we die. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're making a difference with end-of-life care.
Okay, well, I have a number of hats. As you mentioned, I am an end-of-life doula. I'm happy to share a little bit more about that role with you in our time together. I'm also dedicated to training people who are interested in becoming end-of-life doulas. I facilitate the end-of-life doula training course through Douglas College here in BC, as well as offer training through my business Endwell for care providers in the end-of-life space, where we provide a virtual training program to teach participants how to create rituals for the dying and their families. Service is very important to me. You may know doula is actually the Greek word for servant. And I'm honored to be a volunteer at my local hospice here, North Shore Hospice. I've been a volunteer there for over 6 years, and I serve as a mentor there, where I now train new volunteers. I also give my time to the North Shore Vigil team to sit vigil with those who are dying alone in care homes. Regrettably, this position has been suspended due to COVID. I volunteer as well as a board member for the End of Life Doula Association of Canada, where we're working to establish a center of excellence for the doula profession through education, research, and advocacy for the profession. And most recently, I have been called to create more space for grief. Last fall, I partnered with Megan and Sarah, 2 colleagues of mine, to volunteer time to create a 12-week grief group that focused on exploring grief through ritual in community. And I'm very excited to announce that this has led to a partnership with BC Centre for Palliative Care, and we will be working with the Centre in 2021 to provide a virtual space for grief targeted at isolated seniors due to the pandemic.
That's a full plate.
Yes.
When you sleep, yeah. Well, and it's all good work, and I think the ongoing pandemic has really opened a lot of eyes to some really systemic problems and issues and challenges that we face, especially with folks that are on their own. And it's really important work that you're doing. I've been in the funeral business now for going on 37 years, and it's only been the last 5 or so that I've really started to hear more about end of life doulas. I've heard about training programs. I've heard about Douglas College and the Winnipeg Free Press when there was a graduation ceremony held a couple of years back. But maybe you can share with us, give us a basic understanding of what an end of life doula is and what it is exactly that you do.
Sure. So an end of life doula supports the dying process with the dying and their families. And I think it's easy maybe for people to consider a birth doula in their role because it's very similar, just at the end of life. So it's a non-medical, community-based role that's aimed to help the dying and their families cope with the transition of death, um, by recognizing that it's natural and also that it can be a time for healing and beauty. And I often find it's easy to sort of look at the who, what, why, when, where, and how of what doulas do, just for people to really understand what the role is. So who do doulas serve? Doulas support not only the dying, but their families as well. And we are privately members of the palliative care team. So we also work with healthy people actually to complete advanced care planning, which is a process of exploring beliefs, values, um, and wishes around healthcare decisions that will be referred to if a person is unable to speak for themselves. And what do we do? So we provide personalized, non-medical, practical, emotional, and spiritual support to the dying and to their care circle. Um, I like to use the word companion, this idea of walking alongside the dying and their families. So it's not about fixing, and it's very much about following the lead of the dying and taking their pace, going where they want to go, and listening. And it's very much about normalizing dying and honoring that transition as part of the natural cycle of life. And I guess the why would you hire an end of life doula? It's really to fill in the gaps of end of life care with individualized support. So doulas encourage people to contemplate their own eventual death earlier in order to make sure that they're able to live according to their own beliefs, values, and wishes, like right up until the very end. And when would you hire a doula? So as I mentioned, there's sort of 2 different times. One would be perfectly healthy people wanting to engage in advanced care planning. And we are also hired after a terminal diagnosis to offer this individualized care plan and to companion the dying and their friends and family through the dying process and actually also through death. And we also companion the bereaved as well. People often wonder, where would I meet with an end of life doula? And we meet our clients in all sorts of places. Due to the pandemic, we are doing more of our visits over the phone and over Zoom. But I have met people in cafes, libraries, rec centers, homes, walking my dog on trails, in parks, in hospices, hospitals, care facilities. It really depends wherever it's most fitting for and comfortable for those seeking support. And how do we support people? So we're really, as doulas, well resourced in what's available in our communities to the dying, and we can offer individuals and families this practical and personalized support to do what they can to facilitate a dignified end of life experience. So we do this by pre-planning, as I mentioned, so considering beliefs, values, and wishes, which is the process of advanced care planning, helping people arrange key documents and get prepared for their eventual death. We really encourage end-of-life discussions to capture ideas around values. We can provide referrals, therapy awareness through our network community. We can support clients and their loved ones, as I mentioned, practically and spiritually before and after death. A big part of our role also is advocating. So once people express their wishes to us, we can really help advocate for these wishes to become a reality. And just the emotional well-being of the dying. So as I like to use the word completing relationships, really helping people that are dying strengthen and complete relationships with family and friends. We also sit vigil with the dying. We can establish legacies and help support primary caregivers with respite and emotional support as well.
You cover a lot with all of that, and when those that old phrase, it takes a community to raise a child. It also takes a community to grieve and to celebrate and to move a family and that person through to that end of life point. It's not just one person trying to do it by themselves. So you really pick up a lot of the slack in a lot of areas. And with everything that you said about all that you've been involved with, it just seems to make natural sense that this is where you've been called to come and help people. It's
It's
yeah.
a, it's a term that you often hear. A lot of people refer to this calling, and a mentor of mine, Bodhi B, says that this is very much that is, it is absolutely a calling, and it's more it definitely yeah, it's a lot of different roles. I like to think of it as being like water and flowing to where the need is.
Mhm.
And we do cover a lot, but I once saw a or a diagram of a doula in the center, and then there was all these adjacent, like you mentioned, this community of care that supports the dying: funeral directors,
Mhm.
chaplains, maybe it's home support, maybe it's green burials, maybe it's doctors, nurses, and there's that overlap, but it's absolutely in the context of this entire palliative care team. So we don't replace anybody. We work alongside and just fill in the gaps wherever they are.
You had mentioned to me in one of our conversations before today that you've worked with a funeral director, and that's a unique thing because we as an industry don't we're kind of very insular with a lot of the ways we do things. We just assume we're going to take care of a family. There's going to be a service for the clergy and a church and things. And we know that those things are changing, and we'll lead into secularism in a minute. But with the role of a funeral director, I understand you mentioned that as part of that circle of care. Uh, you had an experience with a funeral director not long ago with pre-planning for some folks. Just maybe not getting into too many details, but can you tell us a little bit about the story and how that relationship between you and the funeral director was?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So I have been companioning a family through a death. It was a young man, a dad, and a husband who sadly died just after Christmas. And through working with this family, there were some wishes and values that were identified in advance. They were able to make some decisions ahead of time as to disposition and other things. This man wished to be cremated, and it was really important to him that he be cared for by a locally owned and operated sort of grassroots funeral business. So I introduced his family to Nio Davis, who runs Carew Burial and Cremation here in the Vancouver area. And there was a relationship that began ahead of time that I don't think would have been had we not been asking these questions and exploring these ideas. Nayu became aware of the family ahead of time and their unique situation and their wishes. And, the morning that I got the call that this man had died, I was able to kind of liaise and get in touch with Nayo and let her know what had happened. She was familiar with the family. The family was familiar with her and her values and how she cared for people. She very much, encouraged the family spend time with the body, and was very supportive of that. Even offered to her services to bring the body home if that was what the family desired. And knowing that the family wanted to be involved, she very generously encouraged this involvement all along the way. So the family, after spending a lot of time with the body, later was invited to the funeral home. The two young children that were the children of this man that died, we created a beautiful little ceremony in which they wrote notes to their father, included items that were meaningful to them, that were put into the casket. They listened to his favorite song. They watched the casket go into the retort, and they were there for the cremation. And, you know, it ended with Nayo providing the family with a beautiful urn that was very meaningful. There was a connection to birds with this gentleman, and it's a gorgeous rectangular shaped wooden urn that has a silhouette of a person and all these birds flying off, and a little replica of it as a keepsake to hang on to after the urn is interred. And, you know, I just was so moved by how happy and connected the wife was by all of this. You know, even something as a small detail like this locally made meaningful urn, she just was talking about it with such excitement and connection. Just this idea of her values being respected at every turn, and his values. It just was so different than if these conversations didn't happen and this relationship wasn't made ahead of time and the body was just whisked away and you know, given back perhaps in containers that didn't have any meaning. It just allowed for things to slow down, for meaning to be made, and for this experience to be one of connection and beauty. So yeah, I was very grateful for Nayo.
You said something interesting, or a couple of things that I picked up on. The first one was how things were slowed down. And what when I've been asked a couple of times to say a few words at a grave because there hadn't been a strong church connection, and I just brought a few words, and not being trained as a celebrant or a clergy, all I can draw on is what I know, and life stops. You know, everything stops when you get that phone call in the middle of the night of your person has just died. Whatever you're planning on doing has stopped. You're not going to be doing those things anymore. You have to deal with this, but you have to take care of it in a way that is emotionally satisfying, um, not necessarily today, but in 3 years from now, that you've set those roots down emotionally very well, that you've had that support. And I think that's the most important part, is slowing down and stopping and breathing and thinking, and hopefully, like this experience that you're sharing, that you've got a good support structure around you of people that really truly care to make sure that everything is done the way that it should be. And I love this about the kids. I try to get kids involved, you know, and just say, I need your help, you know. Or one example, they were creating some flowers, a nice flower piece, and I said, go out in the back 40 where they lived, and grab some of Dad's favorite stuff when you're picking. You know, they picked some berries, and they picked some birch bark and stuff, and we gave it to the florist, and they incorporated it into the arrangement, which was a tundra piece, which was really, really cool. And but the kids participated. I said, I can't do this by myself. I need your help. And that's what so it just made sense. It just was a good way to do it. You're right. So
Yeah, include the kids, especially in simple ritual if they're open. I think that's so important. Yeah.
yeah, and all of that means communication. That it means that the ears are open and the mouth is shut, and we listen and we pay attention, and then we offer suggestions, hopefully that will resonate, that are going to be good and wholesome. So that's good. I feel better about that, because, you know, we in the funeral industry, sometimes we're just so focused on that family getting in the door and just taking care of them, and there's some time restraints. We're dealing with, they want something in the paper, and we're looking at the time, we've got half an hour, but I've got a bunch of stuff yet to do. You know, sometimes we don't know these folks, and it's a challenge that sometimes we need to slow down and breathe and think and listen and try to offer some good solutions. And I think that's where you come in. That's where you and all of the folks doing what you do come in to try to advocate and to help. Well,
Absolutely. And slowing down is just, it's central to everything that we do. And I think I see it on both ends. Like I see it in the healthcare settings where doctors and nurses like yourself come into this work so well meaning and wanting to serve and care, but are so busy and can't necessarily slow down enough or provide that care within the constraints of what they have to accomplish in their work. And really, the role having somebody there that can create that space by slowing things down and listening and allowing for whatever is present to arise and be witnessed, for people to be seen and heard, you know, exactly where they are,
mm,
I think is so deeply important for navigating death.
mm,
And so much is going on, so much is being taken, there's so many losses to keep up with. And if we don't slow things down, if we don't create space, and if people aren't witnessed, this can really lead to congestion and trauma and experiences that are really difficult to move on from.
mhm.
So it's on both ends. I see, Richard, like the healthcare side and the funeral side, and that is a huge value, I think, of the role of an end of life doula.
Mhm. Thank you. Well, this is wrapping up our first part because we've had a bit of a discussion, and when we were thinking of questions, we've got way more than we can fit into one episode because we'd like to keep these episodes within 20 to 30 minutes. So we thank you for now, Tracy, for joining us here today, and we look forward to some other questions. And we thank our audience here today that's joined us. With the post that will go up, there'll be some links to Tracy's information and website, my website, and the Green Burial information there, and also the link to the Green Burial Society of Canada. So with that, Tracy, thank you again for joining us here today. This is Richard Rosen from Winnipeg, from Green Burial, Manitoba, signing off.